You think you know the story of Disney's Snow White remake, but the truth behind how it all collapsed will shock you. This wasn't just another bad film. It was a perfect storm of corporate greed, controversial casting, political drama, and behind-the-scenes chaos that turned a fairy tale into a nightmare. By the time the credits rolled, Disney wasn't just dealing with a box office bomb, they were staring at one of the most embarrassing failures in the company's history. It all started with the remake that nobody asked for. For years, fans warned Disney not to touch Snow White. The original was Walt Disney's crown jewel, the very first full-length animated film in history, the project he protected above all else. But Disney executives saw a chance to cash in on nostalgia and ignored the warnings. What followed was a series of decisions so baffling it almost seemed like they were trying to sabotage themselves. The numbers alone paint a brutal picture. Theaters sat empty, ticket sales came in nearly 50% lower than projected, and online ratings were abysmal, a humiliating 1.6 out of 10 on IMDb and barely 20% on Rotten Tomatoes. Critics mocked the cartoonish CGI dwarves, audiences called it lifeless and soulless, and even die-hard Disney fans abandoned ship. But what made this failure truly infamous wasn't just the movie itself. It was the chaos surrounding its star, Rachel Zegler. On paper, Rachel was the kind of success story Hollywood loves to sell. A teenager from New Jersey with no connections, no agent, and no professional acting credits, she sent an audition tape to Steven Spielberg for his West Side Story remake. Out of 30,000 hopefuls, she was chosen for the lead role of Maria. Her performance earned rave reviews, and even a Golden Globe. To many, she looked like the industry's next big star. But almost immediately, cracks began to show. Whispers started that Rachel was an industry plant. Fans couldn't believe someone with zero track record was handpicked for such a massive role. And while she may have been a fresh face, Rachel quickly developed a reputation for something else, a sharp tongue and a tendency to stir controversy. That reputation would follow her into Snow White and play a huge part in why the movie became such a disaster. The announcement of Rachel as the new Snow White should have been a triumphant moment. Instead, it sparked immediate backlash. Rachel herself poured gasoline on the fire by tweeting, "Yes, I am Snow White. No, I am not bleaching my skin for the role." She deleted it, but the damage was done. Fans were confused. Snow White's very name and identity comes from her skin, as white as snow. Casting someone who didn't fit that description might not have been a problem if Disney had simply created a new story. But changing such an iconic character, and then making sarcastic remarks about it online, made Rachel an instant target. To make matters worse, Disney had just faced similar backlash with The Little Mermaid remake, when Halle Bailey was cast as Ariel. While that movie eventually made a healthy profit, the racial controversy dominated headlines for months. With Snow White, the arguments flared up again, except this time, Rachel herself seemed to mock the original film at every turn. She gave interviews where she dismissed Prince Charming as a stalker and insisted her Snow White wouldn't be dreaming of true love, but of becoming a powerful leader. While her intentions may have been modern, her tone came across as smug, even disrespectful. Fans who loved the 1937 classic felt like she was insulting them directly. It didn't help that Rachel seemed to contradict herself constantly. In one interview, she said she was terrified of the original Snow White and never wanted to watch it again. Yet in another, she showed childhood photos dressed as the princess, claiming it had always been her dream role. The mixed messages only fueled the perception that she was in over her head, saying whatever sounded good in the moment, even if it didn't add up. And then came her infamous red carpet remark during promotion for Shazam, Fury of the Gods. When asked why she joined the superhero franchise, Rachel quipped, "I needed a job. I'm being so serious." While she later expressed gratitude, the initial comment struck fans as unprofessional and ungrateful. It fed into the narrative that she was entitled, already complaining about Hollywood when she'd barely started her career. By the time the 2023 writers' strike hit, Rachel's image was spiraling further. She voiced her support for the strike, but again in a way that backfired. She argued that if she had to stand in a dress for 18 hours, She deserved to be paid for every streaming hour of the film. While her point was technically about residuals, her delivery came off as arrogant. For someone with only 2 films under her belt, demanding more money while writers struggled to pay rent made her an easy target for criticism. Overnight, she became a symbol of Hollywood entitlement. Meanwhile, Disney's own decisions were turning Snow White into a ticking time bomb. The controversy over the 7 dwarves exploded when actor Peter Dinklage, famous for his role in Game of Thrones, slammed Disney for continuing a backward story about dwarves living in caves. Afraid of backlash, Disney announced they would replace the dwarves with a diverse group of magical creatures of all sizes and genders. But when leaked set photos hit the internet, fans were horrified. The characters looked like cheap medieval fair performers, and even worse, real little person actors who could have played the roles were being denied work. Instead of solving the problem, Disney created a bigger one: lawsuits, outrage, and a fan base that was abandoning the project in droves. As production stumbled forward, the tension behind the scenes grew worse. Rachel and her co-star Gal Gadot, who played the evil queen, were rumored to be at odds. During joint interviews, Rachel avoided eye contact, looked away when Gal spoke, and projected an awkward energy that fans quickly picked up on. And then Rachel made a political statement that poured fuel on the fire. When the official trailer dropped and racked up over 120 million views, she used the moment to post, "And always remember, free Palestine." For some, it was an admirable show of solidarity. But Gal Gadot is Israeli and had openly voiced her support for her country, especially after violent conflicts broke out in October 2023. Rachel's post was interpreted by many as a direct jab at her co-star, and the fallout was immediate. Gal began receiving death threats, so severe that Disney was forced to hire her a personal security detail. Executives scrambled to contain the damage. A top Disney producer even flew across the country to personally confront Rachel, warning her she was putting the entire film and the jobs of thousands of crew members at risk. At this point, Rachel's critics were calling her everything from arrogant to narcissistic. And, unfortunately for Disney, things were about to get even worse. Rachel's controversies were piling up, but she wasn't done yet. Old social media posts resurfaced, and this time they weren't just sarcastic quips about movies. They were raw political rants that instantly reignited a firestorm. After Donald Trump's election, Rachel had posted furious Instagram stories calling his supporters hateful and even wishing they would never know peace. For an actress now representing Disney's most family-friendly princess, these posts were a nightmare. Conservative media pounced, blasting Disney for hiring someone they saw as openly hostile to half the country. The same company that once fired Gina Carano for controversial political comments was now being accused of hypocrisy for standing by Rachel. Disney panicked. Reports suggest they forced her to delete the most inflammatory posts and even assigned her a social media handler to vet everything she wrote. But the damage was already irreversible. She had become the face of a film that, months before release, was drowning in negativity. The internet wasn't just skeptical of the movie, it was actively rooting for it to fail. And for Disney, a company spending over $250 million on production and marketing, that spelled disaster. By the time Snow White premiered, the verdict was clear. This remake wasn't going to be the next Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast. Instead, it was destined to be remembered alongside some of Disney's biggest box office disasters. On opening weekend, it scraped together just $87 million worldwide. At first glance, that might sound impressive, but compared to its colossal budget, rumored to have ballooned to nearly $300 million after reshoots, it was catastrophic. Disney had gambled on nostalgia, but audiences weren't buying what they were selling. The reviews were brutal. Critics shredded the movie for its overuse of CGI, lifeless sets, and bland storytelling. Fans who did give it a chance walked away calling it soulless, cheap, and unnecessary. The dwarves, redesigned with computer animation, were widely mocked online as nightmare fuel. The evil queen, played by Gal Gadot, was described as not evil enough, while Rachel's Snow White was criticized for lacking the magic, charm, and innocence of the original. For many, this wasn't a fairy tale at all. It was a cautionary tale about what happens when a company ignores its audience. But perhaps the final nail in the coffin wasn't the movie itself, but Rachel's response to its failure. Instead of humility, she doubled down. After the box office numbers came in, Rachel posted a cryptic, almost defiant message.
Everyone who hates when I win, the winged victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still line up to see her. And I can only hope that despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them, that at every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
To her critics, it was the ultimate confirmation. Rachel wasn't reflecting on mistakes or acknowledging the disappointment. She was comparing herself to a broken masterpiece, implying that despite everything, she was still worth worshipping. Fans who already suspected she was self-absorbed now felt certain. The backlash reached a fever pitch. Instead of helping Disney salvage the film, Rachel's words pushed even more people away. And yet, in the middle of all the chaos, something strange became clear. As much as Rachel bore the brunt of the criticism, the movie's failure wasn't entirely her fault. Even her harshest critics admitted she could sing beautifully. Her acting wasn't the problem. The real issue was Disney itself. The company had become addicted to remakes and reboots, reimagining classics not out of love, but for profit. Each new project felt more like a corporate product than a piece of art. And with Snow White, Disney crossed a line. They stripped the story of its original charm, injected politics and messaging that divided audiences, and leaned so heavily on CGI that the so-called live-action film barely felt alive at all. It was as if Disney had forgotten what made their classics timeless in the first place. Walt Disney himself once refused to approve sequels to Snow White, insisting it was a masterpiece that should remain untouched. But decades later, the company ignored his wishes and churned out a remake that alienated the very fans it needed most. For Rachel, the fallout was even more personal. Once hailed as Hollywood's brightest new star, she was now branded as entitled, arrogant, and difficult to work with. Her career wasn't over, but the shine had faded. Instead of being remembered as the breakout star of a new Disney era, she became the face of one of the company's biggest flops. For Disney, the lesson was painful. They had ignored online outrage, dismissing it as toxic fandom. They thought audiences would complain online but show up anyway. Instead, fans proved them wrong. They refused to buy tickets. They sent a message that when studios disrespect the source material, dismiss audience concerns, and prioritize political points over storytelling, they won't be rewarded at the box office. In the end, Snow White wasn't just another failed remake. It became a symbol of Hollywood arrogance, of Disney's disconnect from its audience, and of the risks of handing a billion-dollar legacy to an untested star who wasn't ready for the spotlight. It's almost poetic. Snow White, the film that started it all for Disney back in 1937, was turned into the movie that exposed just how far the company had fallen. Instead of honoring Walt's vision, they betrayed it. Instead of creating magic, they created controversy. And instead of building a new generation of fans, they alienated the old ones. The truth is, this remake should never have been made. The original was already perfect, a masterpiece of animation, music, and heart. Trying to modernize it only revealed how out of touch Disney had become. And while Rachel Zegler's story may not be over, the story of Disney's Snow White remake ends here, as a reminder that not every fairy tale deserves a reboot, and not every happy ending can be manufactured in a boardroom. So when people look back at this disaster, they won't remember the CGI dwarves or the political tweets alone. They'll remember how Disney ignored its own history, ignored its own fans, and watched as the fairest story of them all turned into a cautionary tale for the ages.